Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, upon me hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, hey, in diaspora, current affairs, hey, reliable information, history, talking about culture, yeah, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Liberia History Channel on Focus on Liberia. First of all, happy Unification Day. Today is National Unification Day, and I want to wish all Liberians and friends of Liberia happy Unification Day. Now, the idea of unification is even older than the Republic of Liberia. That's why if you go to Gompa City, you hear Kwado, Liberia Kwado. If you go to Swakoko, you hear Kukatona. You go to Palibo, you hear Bolibo. All these things signify unification. Let's come together. Banudedo, let's be one. So today is National Unification Day. What does this day mean? What's the history behind it? And what does it mean when you say Unification Day? Exactly. When it started, why it started, and where are we when it comes to national unification? Are we further or closer to that goal? Today is National Unification, and the Liberia History Channel presenter Carl Yeyia is here to tell us about Unification Day. Carl, welcome to the show.
So, it was officially signed into an act of legislature in 1960, the 1959-1960 legislative session signed it into an act. But before that time, Tubman had already kind of through some executive order declared National Unification Day. About 6 years earlier than that, with a huge commencement program. So, Councillor Fanati Kofa, who is the Speaker of the House, did a very good job of laying this out in his message today, and I kind of highlighted that in the slides. I was actually impressed by his presentation, and also Vice President Jeremiah Kuhn on behalf addressed the country on behalf of the executive branch of government because the president is traveling, and he also made some very powerful points that I wanted to highlight as well. I'd like to look at what they said before we get into the history of it. Because I think, it's important to draw it into contemporary times. But unification is basically what it says it is. It's about bringing people from really different backgrounds together as one. Liberia has distinct ethnic groups. Liberia has descendants from very distinct cultural, historical, political groups that have, by will, mostly come together to be part of this republic. and been able to hold together through, thick and thin, mostly thin, where we were battling after the partitioning of Africa, we were battling, trying to hold on to territory. It has not been an easy road for this country, and it has not been, led, contrary to popular belief. Our struggle for sovereignty hasn't been led by one group either. So we need to remember these things as we talk about unification. It also means unification and understanding everyone's contribution to keeping this nation sovereign politically.
Again, happy Unification Day. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is the Liberia History Channel. This is where we talk Liberia history. And Liberia Unification Day, or the National Unification Day, is one of them. And that's why we are here. If you have not done so already, please share the show, invite someone, and let's have that handshake. The click of the finger will tell you that this is Liberia and we are indeed one people. Carl, I like the map. I like the drawing here.
Yes, I got the handshake from, we'll talk about why, but it's from an issue of Liberia Today from 1954. So this is our traditional handshake among Liberians. And it used to be the official handshake for the country. I don't know how many people still do the finger and snap thing. A lot of that has been lost. I know my late father and his friends used to greet each other this way. I haven't seen too many young people doing it, but I just thought it was a beautiful image to kind of capture that aspect of our culture that might not even be as strong as it was even when I was a child. I don't see people doing this as much anymore.
Yeah. And COVID did not help either.
Right.
Today was Unification Day, and Vice President Jeremiah Kwan addressed, or himself as the speaker. He said, there are no American Liberians, no indigenous Liberians. We are one people with one common patrimony, striving to achieve a shared destiny, a better Liberia for our children to inherit.
Yes.
Now,
I don't know who the speechwriter was that put the word patrimony in this. That's the only objection I have. But I love the quote. Patrimony basically means to inherit something from men, from males, from fathers. And that's very disturbing that someone would put that in a unification speech. That word got under my skin. Half of the country is, made up of comprised of women. So we don't want to call our national heritage a patrimony. It's not a patrimony. It is a nation, and it's a nation that has both genders. So I don't know where that language came from, but that is anti-unification. Unification is not only about, and you'll see when we get into Tubman discussions, and unification is not only about ethnicity, it is also about gender. Because this is shortly after women got suffrage in this country, in Liberia. Women had the right to vote, so they're bringing all of this into it, bringing the country together, all hands on deck, all, hands on board. We need to make sure that all people are involved in the process of moving the country forward, and this includes women. So no, it is not, Liberia is not a common patrimony. It is a heritage of both men and women and our collective contributions to the advancement of the state.
Thank you. And these are some of the old English, just like the same way people used to say policemen, and now they say, oh no, they are women too, so police officer. So
it's not analogous at all, Dennis. I beg to differ.
Hold on.
Beg to differ. Using the term patrimony and using the term policeman are not analogous in my mind, because
if you allow me to finish, right? Because patrimony is talking about only men. The same way policemen was only men, right? So
no, it didn't only mean men, because the thing is, in English, if you look at grammar, the word man represents all human beings.
It did before, but that was wrong.
It
right?
really does. So patrimony under patrimony is a specific term. It's not analogous because one is an English semantics thing where people went extreme and said, no, the word men should not represent all human beings. But it
Right,
kind of does in the English language.
No, it does not, right?
But
It does not.
patrimony,
It represents men.
I'm pretty sure I know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to argue about it. Patrimony is distinctly different because it's speaking of male heritage. It has nothing to do with semantics of English grammar.
No, but man and woman, that's not semantics. Men mean men. And so
in Latin and dramatic languages, if we really want to get into linguistics, people being militant and saying we should not say policeman or postman or chairman are actually incorrect as far as the language is concerned. Just like the French language has feminine and masculine qualities, European languages do that. That's a completely different issue. What I'm talking about is the word patrimony. Patrimony is not one of those situations where it's an issue of linguistics.
Right. I disagree, but we can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm saying
because I mean, in French, right, you have feminine and masculine words. It's just how European languages are.
A lot of people still use that today, you know, our papa's land. That's why I'm saying all these are old English now, because we no longer want to use men to represent everybody. We now want to use both the male and female to represent everybody, right? That's all I'm saying. But we can move on.
Patrimony is a loaded term.
And it represents male. Inheritance from
patrimony
men.
Is specifically and intentionally about, it's just the way patriarchy has a meaning and matriarchy has a meaning. Patrimony, so that's a little bit different.
I'm equating it to
if I'm chairman of a board, you can say, you know, chairman of a board, I don't take offense to that. But you say patriarchy, it's a completely different thing. Anyway, Councillor Kofa, I think, did a phenomenal job here laying this out. The Unification Day is not just about executive orders. Since 1960, as he correctly said, it was enshrined in an act of the legislature. And this was the 1959 to 1960 legislative session. And the 14th of May is designated as National Unification Day, highlighting the importance of unity and integration. This word integration, we're going to talk about this quite a bit more. It stands as a pivotal moment, signifying our commitment to bridging historical divides and fostering a cohesive future. Today, we celebrate the diverse fabric of our nation, reiterating our steadfast dedication to promoting inclusivity and understanding among all citizens. And this is a very powerful statement. Councillor J. Fonati Kofa, Speaker of the House of Representatives, he said this today, May 14th, 2024. I like his choice of words. I think that he was very intentional in not talking about or naming specific groups that may have been divided, right? Where other leaders made a point to say, oh, there was a divide between American Liberians and Congo people, you know, all this language he omitted, which is extremely important and I believe intentional, because it leaves for you to determine what your understanding is while stating the facts of what this Unification Day is about, and then talking about the need for us to celebrate our diversity. He says today we celebrate the diverse fabric of our nation. So there is still unity within a diverse nation. It doesn't mean everybody needs to be homogenous. We don't all have to be one way or be one particular group. We don't all have to walk the same walk. But we can celebrate our collective heritage. And he understands here that there's no need to say that the heritage that we have is male or female. It is collective. And yeah, so this is very much, but he's a lawyer. They know how to pen things, right? To not offend people. This man has a Juris Doctorate degree, so he probably wrote this himself. But this sums up exactly what Unification Day is. I mean, it is an act of law, so it is a national holiday, and it has been a national holiday, contrary to what most people believe, since 1960.
And that's something that we'll talk about a little more today when we say, what does it mean? What does unification mean? Because today we celebrate the diverse fabric of our nation. So we are diverse. So diversity, unification in the midst of diversities, what does that mean? And how can we see that in practice? Because there's a lot of misconception and a lot of misunderstanding and interpretation today as I listen to other speeches, what they really think unification is. Because something diversity means we are divided. And so we're going to go into that a little later.
Yeah, some people do think that diversity means that we're divided. Clearly, diversity doesn't mean we're divided. We've had, throughout time, we have recognized by the government 15 different ethnic groups. We have diverse people who repatriated to Liberia. So this concept of this oversimplifying our people and saying, oh, it was Congo versus Native. I mean, there are recognized 15 distinct ethnic groups that have not been under one umbrella prior to this, prior to the creation of the Republic. People who were belonging to various groups that went to war for centuries, actually, and were arch enemies before the creating of the Republic. People fought and sold each other into slavery before the establishment of the Republic. People who came and repatriated to the Republic are descendants of people who were forcibly removed from the continent of Africa, but they were not all taken to the same place. They did not all have the same experiences. So we have people who repatriated to Liberia from the United States, some of whom were born free, some of whom were descendant or themselves were recaptured Africans from different parts of Africa, intercepted upon slave ships after 1808, when the transatlantic slave trade became illegal. While slavery was still in effect in the Western Hemisphere, United States, Brazil, the Caribbean, what was not continued at that point was the transport of human beings from Africa. They were still doing it, but it was supposedly illegal. So they would capture these people. We call them recaptured Africans or Congos. They were also returned. You had people that returned from places like Barbados and from Trinidad and other parts of the world. We had a small group from Jamaica. So you had also people from the southern United States, which at that time was so culturally different from people just as, in Maryland and New York and places like that. So the diversity, even among the repatriates, was important, is important to note. And not to mention the diversity among the people that are classified as natives or indigenous. So there was never a time prior to the Republic of Liberia being established when everyone was thinking of themselves as one. This idea that there was some monolithic group called Native people is a myth, and it is a really disservice to the population of Liberia to oversimplify in those terms.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
J. Dudley Lawrence, 10th session of the United Nations General Assembly. A vigorous unification program inaugurated in 1944 is effectively smashing the last vestige of any barriers that existed between tribal groups and governing culture. Already, at Mr. Tubman's persistence, the suffrage has been extended to the hinterlands and women alike, and education and health facilities are being provided without discrimination to all sections of the country through 96 medical clinics, 5 leper hospitals, a sanatorium, and 20 general hospitals.
So he's talking about a time period before, obviously, the legislative act was passed in 1966. So this is 1944. So in 1944, this is the seed that's sown for national unification. I would go further back than that. I would go back to Daniel Bashir Warner, Stephen Allen Benson days. I would go back, from I would start with Benson. I would go to Warner. Many Liberian presidents had made efforts towards unification long before. I mean, Daniel Edward Howard significantly opened up the Liberian territory to try to bring many of the groups that are the Mendi ethnic groups, the people that are now occupying Nimba Lofa Bong, into the Liberian state. This was met with resistance. We often talk about our history as though there was a situation of people being denied access to become Liberian. When, if you look at the historic record and you even think about it in rational terms, what really was happening was many of our people didn't see any reason initially to be part of this republic. It was a strange system of government. In order to be a Liberian, you had to change so many things about their belief system, even to become part of a democracy in the Western sense. So if I am King Momolu of Bopolu, and you coming at me and telling me, hey, come and be Liberian, what incentive do I have to do so and give up my power and cede my power and authority in my state to another state? There's two ways that you can incorporate a population into a new country: by will or by force. The government of Liberia, even under our Bassa president, Daniel Howard, did not have the ability to forcibly incorporate the people of the North and Central Territory of Liberia. So this was a gradual process that really began during Daniel Howard's time. I mean, I shouldn't even say that, because you had during James Frick Spain time, you had with, Benjamin Anderson and other people going and trying to sign treaties and make arrangements and agreements with indigenous leaders. But it was really during Howard's time that they now exerted a military presence into the hinterland. And it's through that military force that made way for incorporation. And by the time Tubman comes along, he wants to now complete this process that even Edwin Barclay has started, which is building more schools, trying to carry churches in the interior, partnering with the various church groups to open more schools and expand the reach of the English language and English literacy and this Western education system into the hinterland. So what he's describing here is also they were going in there with clinics and hospitals. This is the time period they're talking about Phoebe Hospital, Ganta Methodist Hospital. A lot of these hospitals are being built at this time, clinics, schools, agricultural programs, all of this stuff is happening simultaneously around this time period. And this was part of his whole unification scheme. So he's saying there were 96 medical clinics and 5 hospitals. Leprosy was a big problem in the mid-19th century. So there were 5 leper hospitals. One of them is at Rehab in Ganta, where I'm from. And 20 general hospitals were built during this period, this early period of Tubman's administration.
So this is 2 parts, right? Talk about unification and integration.
Yes. And if you remember, Councilor Kofa that's why I said I was very impressed by what he said. I mean, it's literally what he says. He said the importance of unification and integration. And this is exactly what the ambassador is saying at the 10th UN General Assembly. I believe that was in 1954. So, but he's talking about the prior 10 years, what Tubman had accomplished.
So we're moving on.
So this, you can go ahead and read, but before you do, let me just give a backdrop. So this was a Hands Across the Country campaign that President Tubman, so this, before we even get to the law, you have President Tubman basically doing a whole campaign around this thing, right? So he has this campaign called Hands Across the Country, and he is trying to get everybody involved. But go ahead and read, Dennis.
All right. Hands Across the Country. The Bureau of Information of the Liberian Department of State has recently released a special publication on the National Unification Program of Liberia under the title Hands Across the Country. The publication is a report of the National Executive Council of the paramount chiefs of the provinces, counties, territories, and districts of Liberia, representing every indigenous element in the Republic. The council met in the city of Harper, Maryland County this year. More than 500 persons were flown across the country at the government's expense, housed, fed, and entertained for the 6-week meeting. Anyway,
I mean, 6 weeks. This is not a small endeavor. Imagine a 6-week conference. You bring people from all over. You talk about 500 delegates representing various clans and communities being brought together in one place for 6 weeks. People who would have never met one another. One of the important things about centralization is it takes someone from Plebo and makes them part of the same country as someone from Vanjama, as someone from Tiwa in Grand Cape Mount, as someone from Yigbanla at the border of Nimba and Bong. So unification, contrary to what people think, is not only about repatriated people and indigenous people. It is about indigenous people and indigenous people. It's about Marylanders and people from Maserado. It's about, because at this point in history, you have a distinct divide between even the repatriated people. Tubman represents these, his parents were from Georgia. His mother was born in Georgia. Tubman had an African-American accent. And you have a descendant of Barbados being his predecessor, Edwin Barclay, who tried to mentor him, and then there became some issues. So unification is about putting the country first and recognizing the state as the glue that holds us all together.
But something is driving this, right? Because what you're saying, we have different people coming together. So the settlers alone did not get along. People from Barbados, people from America, and all these people, native and settlers, native and native. So there was this division. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I'm saying there's no homogenous group of people called settlers. There's no homogenous group of people that are natives. Those are not two homogeneous groups. How can you take people who are from completely different backgrounds and group them all together into one lump sum and say this is what it is? It diminishes our diversity and our humanity even, because it removes our distinct linguistic, historic, and cultural legacies.
So that was the purpose, because not all these groups were all different and they had differences. So that's what Tubman now is trying to address. This is the issue.
which is why he brings these 500 people together and he's telling them, hey, you know, Toga, Se, Sa, you know, Boaka, Tape, all of y'all that have seen people, we are Liberian citizens. If you notice, the Constitution does not mention what we call tribe. There's no tribe in the Constitution. You're just a Liberian. But that was not understood to people. And the other thing that Tubman needed to do was make sure that the people that were semi-autonomous understood that their semi-autonomy was no longer going to take precedent over the state. That while we've allowed the Republic of Liberia has allowed you to continue to run certain traditions, it's no longer going to be the case. You can no longer hold slaves. You can no longer pawn human beings. You have to abide, while we'll recognize customary law as long as it does not conflict with the Constitution. And this is very important because that had not happened before. If you had gone to Tabata, it was law unto itself for the most part. And even the government representatives that were local people that were used to be or chosen to be commissioners and district commissioners and things like that, they were engaging in things that had absolutely nothing to do with the central authority. They functioned in a very decentralized way, exerting all kinds of abuses and constitutional violations upon their citizens. These things needed to be addressed. Tubman believed unification would correct this, reminding everyone that you are under one constitution and one flag. And even if you belong to some old order or tradition, which makes you it keeps you in perpetual servitude to another person, that is no longer recognized. You are now a citizen. Sort of like what they did with Cape Mount when it became part of Liberia, right? You are no longer king and your slaves are now our citizens. This is what they were doing way in the 1940s. 100 years, roughly 100 years later, they're still having to communicate this message to our people in the hinterland. You're no longer enemies. This Pele clan, this Ma clan, you people have been fighting each other for 150 years. You're no longer enemies. The rolling wars have ceased. It was really during Tubman's time that the wars in the interior of the country ceased. Imagine that, talking about in the 1940s, which is why many of our grandparents can remember wars, tribal wars from their childhood, because it was still happening. You still had Grable clans fighting other Grable clans. You still had Pele clans fighting other Pele clans and so on. You still had indentured servitude, which resembles in many ways chattel slavery happening in the interior.
Was there also a divide between the settlers, American Liberians, repatriated Liberians, and the different indigenous groups in Liberia? Was there also a divide?
There was a huge cultural divide between people who were Christianized, westernized, living on the coast, and people who were in the interior. Absolutely, there was a cultural divide. Whether it was based on, excuse me?
I say I'm intentionally using those words because...
Yes, but you're using those words because that's how people talk. But the fact of the matter is, was there a cultural divide between President Howard, who was a Bassa man, and Bassa people living in the northern parts of Bassa? Yes, there was. So the people who settled on the coast came with a sense of cultural supremacy, whether they came from Barbados, whether they came from Maryland, whether they came from Pennsylvania, whether they came from Georgia or Tennessee or Kentucky. The idea is that they were Christian, literacy, Christianity, Western values, they were promoting as a sense of supremacy. And one of the things that religion does is it teaches you to be an evangelist. that you must spread this, that whatever else people believe is invalid. Your beliefs are better. So you have a missionary culture, a culture of wanting to convert people and save people from their own traditions. This causes a huge cultural divide because you're coming with an air of supremacy. What we have and what we're doing is better than what you've been doing. So even as more indigenous people adapt Western culture, they too have a sense of arrogance and condescension. Because you have to remember, everybody's African. Everybody's African. So when Dennis Ja becomes baptized and Christian, you're indistinguishable from all other Christians. You go to church. You know, it's the same thing, you know, with so we've got these problems that have been brewing in the country, layers and layers of complex issues. You have a old Muslim population that was existing in Western Liberia before the establishment of the state. You had an influx of a huge portion after the destruction of Samori Touré's empire, about 40 years after the establishment of the state. So you have an increased population of Muslims that are now also in some ways in conflict with other people in the hinterlands. There's a lot going on. You have people who are seeking refuge from the encroachment of French forces. They've been displaced from their lands. So there are many layers of things that were occurring in Liberia within the territory that needed to be resolved. We asked, why 6 weeks? 500 people for 6 weeks. Perhaps we need to do that again. Perhaps we need to do that again. But this is the conference that led to many of the resolutions and the extended period of peace. The period between 1944 and 1980 is the longest period of peace that has existed in the Republic of Liberia's history. And it really has existed in the 400 to 500 year history of the Grain Coast. It's a period where there was no war, no internal wars. This is important. And this is because this was only possible because they called all of these people to the table. And diffused the conflicts that were fueling wars and violence and the refusal to accept statehood.
President Tedmer gave 3 reasons for calling the national convocation. 1, all people, both civilized and uncivilized, must be united into one consolidated whole. 2, meeting with each other, learning the other fellows' joys and problems will form a sure foundation for the unity of the nation. And 3, investigation on the spot of reports against administrative official is needed.
Yes. I mean, I think these bullets is just a little, synopsis, but I put the word civilized and uncivilized in quotations because that was the language that he used at the time. That's part of the cultural condescendence. The cultural condescendence that's fueled by this idea that the proximity to Western culture and the more you're like a European in speech and conduct, the more civilized you are. And the less you behave like a European in speech and conduct, the more uncivilized you are. What an absurd and unfair worldview. We still carry these beliefs to this day, many of us, but it's absurd. But this was what was absolutely normal at the time. This was why people went to school, so they could become, you know, civilized. And this is what people were told. That if you were not, if you didn't speak, you know, if you didn't speak a European language, if you didn't conduct yourself like a European, you were a savage, essentially.
Right. Carl, I just spoke to someone in Liberia, and they say, hey, her name is Tane. That's my mother's name as well. And she said, oh, that's my native name, and this other name is my civilized name. I said, oh, people still do this in Liberia, called civilized and uncivilized name. That was yesterday. Two persons I spoke to.
Of course. There's still remnants of it. I think people are awakening from this, right? But this was a mentality. Imagine the kind of not only conflict between groups of people who have already supposedly advanced to civilization, but imagine the conflict that causes internally for a person, self-esteem. For young people to go to school and they're calling you Gawe, you get to school, they said, no, your name is not Gregory. Because you have advanced and ascended above your own people, your own mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers. It is a horrible thing. It is not unique to Liberia. It isn't even unique to Africa. It doesn't make it any less horrible. And what that does and how that plays on the psyche and the consciousness of a society is important. So we like to look at that and say this is an Americo-Liberian thing, but we have to also remember that the Americo-Liberians themselves were subjected to this dehumanization because they're essentially Africans who are being told that to de-Africanize themselves, to conduct themselves in a less African way. And as the people we classify as indigenous become more westernized, again, also de-Africanizing themselves, and then continuing this thing of mimicking and the mimicry and the adoration of Western culture and upholding that as the ideal of human advancement. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it was, and it is still what it still is.
And we want to,
as you said just yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, what people say to me, oh, how your parents name you call, and you were not even, and you were born in America. And I'm like, I'm a mono woman. Why I shouldn't have a mono woman name? Does it matter where I'm born?
Yeah. People
so our traditions are really frowned upon and disrespected by even ourselves.
Yeah, that's the education we got.
Yes.
As a result of his investigations, 2 district commissioners were dismissed and 1 paramount chief suspended. The president, as President Tubman, decided many long-standing boundary disputes, one of them 30 years old. Upon request of the chiefs, he obligated the government to provide more medical units, more schoolhouses in 1955, and to furnish more tools and equipment to construct new roads and to recondition old ones. Oh, so even this time they were talking about no cars stuck in the mud. Oh, I'm kidding.
Of course, and Tubman did a great job with the roads, with the road networks. He continued the efforts of Daniel Edward Howard. You know, contrary to what people understand, it was President Howard who actually commissioned the longest road that's in Liberia, the Monrovia to Guinea border that passes through Kakata, Bong, and Nimba. So these are not new roads. Tubman started paving this road, but besides, even before Howard commissioned it being turned into a car road, before we even had any cars in the country, that was an ancient footpath So they just built the car road over an ancient footpath. The Unification project, the Hands Across the Country project that Tubman did, should really be discussed more. It was genius. It was one of the reasons we had such a long period of sustained peace in our country. Because for most of our country's history, we've had violent internal conflicts between different clans and groups of people. When Queen Suakoko threw herself upon the mercy of the Liberian government and President Howard, and gave President Howard way to enter a territory that the Liberian government had been blocked from entering since its inception. It was Queen Suakoko who said, no, you got to come here. We've been killing each other. We're tired of fighting war. And what they found when they went there was pure devastation. If you read Benjamin Anderson's narrative of A Journey to Musadu, he talks about is raging, violent wars between different groups of people. That the Liberian government had no way of even knowing what was happening because they were not allowed. They had what they called a wall of non-penetration. They were not allowed to go beyond a certain point within the territory. Anderson was Anderson was the first Liberian to enter that interior territory. It was not allowed. You couldn't go past Bopulu. You couldn't go past certain towns. I forgot the name of the town in Banga, but it didn't even reach as far as Suakoko. There's certain places that at this point you can't go any further. And then we know this, then we say, oh, the people didn't let us be citizens. It's like, okay, what do you think we were doing? You think we were sitting around with our own countries, with our own leaders, waiting for somebody to give us citizenship? No, we belong to very old traditions and societies. We had citizenship of our traditional systems. And this idea of oversimplifying our history, Congo country, there were one homogenous group, all this kind of stuff is problematic. It's overly simplified and it distorts reality. It distorts the truth.
Yeah. Anytime you don't understand something, you kind of oversimplify to make it easier for you to understand. But definitely, I heard a lot of that today during the Unification Day speeches and other writing. Before the show, I was doing a research and I started asking people, what does this mean to you? And we will discuss that later, but it was mind-blowing what they were telling me. Because of a complaint of the government's agricultural specialist, the president rebuked the chiefs and the people of a tribal area for refusing to plant seed and seedlings of coffee, cocoa, oil, palm, and rubber, which had been freely furnished them by the government for their own use and benefit. Attention is especially directed to his remarks in connection with this rebuke. Here is the crux of the growth of a country's simple, exciting, and viral. Tell me to follow you.
So the traditional agriculture of our people, we have discussed this many times. We are rice farmers in the Northern Territories, right? And this was all dismantled because a lot of our labor force, about 25 years earlier, 30 years earlier, was being forced to clear the rainforest and make way for the largest plantation on the planet at that time, which was Firestone. The largest plantation in the whole of human history at the time it was built. And the laborers that cleared that rainforest came from these regions. And initially, this labor was basically succumbed to the Firestone project by the traditional leaders. And it was, I hesitate to say forced labor, but that's essentially what it was because people didn't really have a choice. And what that did was it devastated people's traditional ways of providing food. We've been rice farmers for centuries, for millennia, right? So here they come and take these people off the farms. We're no longer producing food. They say, okay, well, we're getting rice from Firestone. We'll use the pusawa. You guys go and plant cash crops. So Tubman thought he was doing well by telling the people to plant cash crops, but that's not the tradition, right? You plant cash crops and you sell the cash crops for food instead of you just planting food. So the people that will not eat a cocoa, will not eat a rubber, changing the way that people survive. Now you produce something that you have to sell and then take it and trade the proceeds for something that you actually need, which is food. Instead of being the food producers that everybody else comes to with goods, you're now making them consumers. This was a tragedy. But this was part of the unification process, unfortunately, because, we had been turned into a massive extractive industry plant, right? Rubber, iron, so we're no longer producers. We're now being exploited economically. In order to survive, you've got to get in or get into the whole groove of it. You've got to be part of this whole cash crop agricultural system that they set up all over Africa, which is, what everybody was doing. Cocoa, coffee, oil palm on a massive scale. And then your basic necessities are then coming from somewhere else, unfortunately.
Gotta get pusawa from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Local holidays.
Yeah. So after the 1980 coup, I'm going to fast forward. So we had Unification Day. We celebrated Unification Day consistently from 1960 until the coup. After the coup, Unification Day continued, but they erased some other holidays and added an interesting one, which was National Redemption Day. So in 1984, the U.S. Department of State issued this for their missionaries and CIA people, whoever else that were sending over to Liberia, in a book where they're explaining to people what is going on in the country, and you had to be apprised of what Liberia is. And they gave everyone these books that they had to study, and this is what they said the holidays were in 1984. So most of them you will recognize as still existing. They still had, Armed Forces Day, Decoration Day, J.J. Roberts' birthday, Day of Fast and Prayer, which was the second Friday in April. You had National Redemption Day. And the Day of Fast and Prayer, those two went together, right? Because they're basically commemorating the coup d'etat as some kind of liberation thing, something to celebrate in the country. So the second Friday in April and April 12th were both supposedly legally celebrating a violent coup d'etat and the violence that ensued afterward. And then we went into, after celebrating this horrific coup, we then go into commemorating Unification Day on May 14th again and continue it. So this was some of the stuff that was happening in Liberia. We celebrate destroying democracy because between 1980 and 1984, there were no elections. They suspended the Constitution. All kinds of things happened. But we're still celebrating Independence Day, July 26th. You see the conflict? You see the contradiction? We're still celebrating Flag Day, August 24th. We're still celebrating Tubman's birthday. Very strange. Very strange. We can go to the next slide.
Liberian TRC, that's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, recommended memorial sites be built, and that National Unification Day be recognized as a national holiday. Significantly, the Liberian government issued a public apology, which was an important aspect in promoting national reparation in Liberia.
Yeah, so I got this from basically this paper from 2018, and I wasn't even aware that the Liberian government issued a public apology for its role in the atrocities. Essentially, the government of Liberia started a conflict that led to the war, right? Because we recognized the 1985 election as legitimate, and we recognized Samuel Doe as a legitimate president, and is the violence that ensued afterwards. We recognize all of that. So the government, you had state-sponsored violence, and you had the president of the Republic of Liberia get up and say, hey, if you don't leave Nimba County, you stay there at your own risk, we're going to kill you, basically. Threaten a whole segment of his own citizens that he's there to sworn to protect. This brings up and rehashes what had been suppressed and reconciled during the Tubman and Talbot administration. You now have a re-emergence of disunity and ethnic conflict. This was not the first time. And for the first time in many people who were alive's history, or lives, right? Because most people that were alive, the majority of the population that was living in 1989, 1990, were not born before Tubman's time. The majority of people living, some people were, but most people who were alive when that war hit in 1990 were not alive before Tubman, or didn't have any consciousness of the world. There might have been young children before Tubman's administration. So probably about a good 70% of the population was born after 1944, right? Because Liberia has always been a pretty young country. And now you have, for the first time in their lives, they're witnessing ethnic violence, violence based on ethnicity. They had not seen it before, but it isn't new. It just had not occurred before. So now the TRC is trying to figure out how to rekindle the spirit of unity. You're not different. There is no Southeast and North Central and this. We are just Liberians. The Constitution does not talk about regions. The Constitution talks about citizens. It does not talk about tribe. It talks about citizens. The Constitution doesn't even talk about your gender. You're just a citizen. So what the TRC is trying to do is rekindle this. And the apology from the Liberian government, I think, is an important thing. It's a very important thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is the Liberia History Channel, and we are discussing National Unification Day. Today, May 14, is set aside as National Unification Day in Liberia. And so we are talking about National Unification Day. Let's move on. And you can see my Unification Day shirt, See how it matches there?
It's a very nice shirt, Dennis. I just like this picture. These are women that appeared on they were in Liberia, and there was a US TV show about Africa, and these were just some young Liberian women showing their traditional African attire. And I just love the photo because it just, if anything represents unification, is this: you don't know anybody's so-called tribe in this photo. You don't know who is Liberian descendant, African American descendant. You don't know who's a descendant of Bajans. You don't know who's Bai. You don't know who's Pele. You don't know who's Gola. You don't know who's Kru. You don't know anything. And the beautiful thing about Liberia is that during the Tubman era, there was so much intermarriage and intermingling and intermixture of people more so under free and willing free will circumstances. So there were forcible marriages, of course, or you will conquer another clan in the 1800s and you will wife all the women. You take all the women back to your town and all the fine women, all the kind of things. But in this particular case, during the Tubman era, during that time of peace, you had Gola woman free will getting married to a Grable man, or a Kru woman free will getting married to a Mono man. This was normal. So a lot of Liberians alive today have parents from different backgrounds, or grandparents even from different. Oh, my grandmother was Basa. Oh, my grandfather was Gola. So people are all mixed up at this point in history. So the unification thing was working. People were seeing themselves as one. Unfortunately, the Doe administration and the war kind of shook that up a little bit. Because prior to Samuel Doe's administration, counties were delineated strictly based on population census. It didn't matter what your ethnic group was. They didn't divide counties based on tribe. President Doe was the first person to say, the Kru people need their own county. It never existed before in Liberia. Grand Bassa was called Grand Bassa because that whole place was called Bassa even before there was a Republic of Liberia. But you've got Bassa people in Monserrato, in Gibi. You've got Bassa people in Nimba. So we're not trying to pigeonhole people by ethnicity into a place. Bon County is not for Pella people. Pella people are a huge ethnic group. They're in Monserrato and Todi. They're in Bopulu. They're in Nimba. Right? But Pella people are the majority ethnic group in Bon because of population census. They were delineating these things because of population. You've got Bassa people who fall into the delineation of Nimba because it was based on population. The Constitution, the government are only supposed to recognize citizens. We have become extremely tribal. Yeah. We have become extremely tribal until everybody wants to break away and form an ethnic county. It's not the legacy of our country. Everyone wants to break away and form ethnic counties. Bopulu broke away from Lofa not because of population, but because of tribalism. River G does not exist because of any reason other than tribalism. We have to talk about these things.
Right.
Grand Kru, of course, being the first to exist strictly because of tribalism. We never had administrative delineation based on tribe in the entire history of the country until after 1980. And we have to pause as a nation and reflect, where are we going with this? The rest of the world is uniting against Africa. You've got the European Union, which is way younger than the African Union. You're talking about uniting ECOWAS. We cannot even unite our tiny little country because of our obsession with this concept of tribe and not wanting to put the country first.
And Corey, may interest you that at some point, the Sapo of Sino County wanted to break away from their own county. So you are right.
It doesn't surprise me at all. It began, and these kinds of things begin. They always say the fish gets rotten from the head. When you have a head of state that is violently tribal, vocally tribal, creates a county, deviates from past precedent, and creates a county that is very small, underpopulated, has nothing to do with population distribution, and creates it simply because Kru people need their own place. You got Dom people in Grand Jita. You've got Kram people in Nimba. This is not about ethnicity. The Constitution doesn't talk about tribe. When you talk about population census and administrative districts, it's for the purpose of fostering democracy based on population and who can vote. That's all. And now we have counties that are so tiny, and others that are so huge. And we're not even remembering why we have counties anymore. We think they're little tribal bases for our people. It's not what it is. It never was. It's very recent, and we'll keep going down the slippery slope. Where are we going to land?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening and want to join the conversation, 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Call before I bring on our callers. I was telling you about
All
the
participants are muted.
of my little survey and what I've listened to today, right?
Mhm.
That we're talking about unification and diversity, because people are now saying, hey, the country is divided. Look
Yeah.
at, we have 20 political parties. Two, we all divided. So does 20 political parties, does it have anything to do with unification?
So there should be political diversity. There should be cultural diversity. The concept here is people should be putting the country's interests first, right? So we need to get back to civics education where we're teaching people that out of many, one nation, right? And that our common priority should be our country and our fellow citizens. There's nothing wrong with having multiple parties in a democracy. The problem with the parties is a lot of them are ethnic based, which is dangerous, right? They're not based on ideas or ideology. They say, okay, we believe in non-alliance, we believe in economic sovereignty for our country, and therefore we are going to form an organization or a political party whose goal and mission is to ensure that the legacy of Liberia's initial struggle for political and economic freedom is upheld. Instead of doing that, we're breaking off into sects based on the language our ancestors spoke.
Thank you. Let me bring on our callers here, because the next thing I was going to ask you is, people say, hey, the country is divided in the middle. 50% went this way, 50% went this, so we are divided. And again, you answer that question. Diversity, the way we vote, that's not what we're talking here. Let me bring in a few callers here. We have 3 already lined up. Elvis Morris, you are number 1. Go ahead, sir. You're live.
Thank you, Mr. Joy, and thank you to presenter. Oh man, I'm enjoying the show, but I'm conflicted because I think we are divided. You know, we're not quote unquote as unified as we should be, and it was evident during the elections. You know, we had our current vice president, you know, saying things that was divisive. We had Senator Johnson saying similar things. We had people from other areas, you know, the senator from Grand Judah, the new senator, saying similar things. So, like, I don't know how to, the administrator, I always get it wrong. So sometimes I have to say, but I would just say call, not out of disrespect. So opportunity, but call was saying that whole tribal thing between the people of Lima and Grand Judah was there for centuries. We had tribal wars, and when those came to power, we ripped that bandit off, and things went out of control. During the elections, you know, the campaigning, you know, Vice President Kuhn was saying about what happened during the war, and so on and so forth. Prince Johnson was saying that President Weah is like Samuel Doe. During, you know, President Weah administration, people was pointing out certain people from a certain region was dominating the government. Even right now, the other way around. People from Lo-Fi is trying to dominate this government. So we're not unified. And I'm disappointed in our President Boycott, because I think, like President Weah, you have a similar cachet of somebody who could unify the country, because a lot of people respect both of them, you know, for different reasons. President Weah was a celebrity, but he's an elderly man. And I think had he took the bull by the horn on this day and had a conference, or at least some semblance of trying to unify people from different, you know, regions of the country, you know, and show it to the nation, especially doing, you know, knowing the political tension that has been in the country the last few months, that would have helped a lot. But he left it to Jeremiah Kuhn, who I think is a big compromise, because he spread some divisive rhetoric during the campaign. So I'm disappointed in that. But I think overall, we have a lot of work to do because our minds and our hearts were not as united and as unified as we should be. And we need to have this, maybe those war crime courts will heal a lot of those wounds, or we just need to have a conference like, President Tubman had, and something, to that nature that could really put everything on the table and let our chiefs and our elders and our political leaders go there and really talk it out and then come and have a national conference explaining to the entire nation and unifying us, at least the optics of reconciling with each other will be great for our psyche. But thank you for the program, for listening, and I will leave it right there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elvis.
Grace Cole. Grace, you're live. 301 area code.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. John.
You don't sound like Grace. What's your name?
I know it's Joe. I don't know what happened. That's my mom. Probably because she was using my phone. Or something.
Okay.
During the conference call, I was like, Grace. I don't know how you got that name, but yeah. I just want to thank you guys both a lot. I'm a young, and I was born there, but I grew up there in America in the DMV area. A recent grad. I appreciate all the knowledge you guys are putting out there, and even the topic you guys are talking about now. I think the main thing really is education. Even though we do have leaders that's not really using their power to the best of their ability to unify the country, I think it's just like community that's important. Like what you guys are doing, being able to spread the word and the knowledge about how just demonstrating to the people of Liberia that being together would empower them even more than just identifying with their tribe. Even though culture is important, it's more about pushing everybody forward and just unifying as a community to uplift each other. And I just want to thank you guys a lot for the educational services you guys provided. It meant a lot. Like I've been learning a lot about Liberia, even though not being there. And I just wanted to thank you and just offer any services as well. If there's anything I can do, I see the donations and stuff. Hopefully I can get to sending those. I'm a recent grad, so I don't got much to send y'all, but hopefully any services, like I met or I was introduced to Mrs. Carol through Jabari, our Gullah Geechee brother. He has a BAIO group. So just seeing her and how she just gives everybody history of Liberia is unbiased and very in-depth, so that you can have like a full picture of it. I appreciate that. And if there's anything that I could do, obviously you guys doing the I think it's the citizenship education for the young Liberians as well. Anything I could do, I would love to do that.
Thank you so much.
And what's your name again? You're not Grace. I know that for sure.
It's Joe. It's not Grace.
Joe Cole?
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that positive feedback. Appreciate it.
We'll definitely be reaching out to you to see where you can contribute. We need you. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Our last caller here is Mr. Aliyu Samba Kamara. Aliyu, you're live.
Yes, Dennis, thank you for asking me.
Hold on, Aliyu. We got someone from Australia trying to reach me. Salia Dukley, turn that something off. You know I'm on the phone and you are calling me. I'm using the Zoom phone. Go ahead. Salia, go ahead quickly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you and Professor Cole for the work you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. And I just want to add 2 points there. Professor Cole talked about the purpose of the unification was to how we unite around the common sense of belongingness that we are Liberians, first and foremost. So the misconception going around in the country nowadays, when you talk about diversity and division, etc., is centered around their own understanding what it means to be different. Nothing wrong being different. We are diverse. A diverse community, there's a diverse religion, diverse ethnicity, etc. Nothing wrong with that. The problem that wrong when it comes to that is when you use those things at the advantage of other people, or you use those differences to divide the country, to hold us back. So the purpose of the unification, as Professor Cole was saying, is to unite against a common purpose. That purpose is to put the country first. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mohammed. That's the gist of it, and you're correct, 100% correct.
And Ali, sorry about that. Mohammed is calling from Australia, so he kept calling. I have to allow him since he can't get on the conference line.
You finished Mohammed now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay, like I said, Christian, well, I'm sort of confused about a couple of things. This thing about the government apologizing for what happened in Nimba, which is a good thing. But I've never heard Nimba apologize for what they did as well. Of the over 250,000 people that died in Liberia during the war, Nimba alone accounts for over 150,000 of those people who were there.
Aliyu,
And
how?
Can I make my point?
No, I mean, I know. Just explain it when you said Nimba account for it.
You have a guest on the show. Let me finish, and then I have a few points to make.
No, I just want you to give how. That's all I'm saying. Just go ahead.
No, Nimba County, especially the Gill and the Mana people, were the ones who actually started from the border to Monrovia. You heard about cutting people here, cutting people's necks from behind their head. We saw those things. We saw heads, calendar as checkpoints. Mandingo people were really brutalized. And the worst thing about it all is the government did bad stuff, and the Gill and Mana people did some very terrible stuff. But the complaint is always only on Do and what Do did. You know? So we cannot cover everything else that, Moses Pan did in Division 35 because Do was a tribalist. That's what I'm saying. So if we're asking for the government to apologize, we should be asking the Gill and Mana people to apologize as well. How about
the Gribble, the Crown, the Mandingo?
You can flag that. The what I wanted to flag is what I flag on that issue.
No, okay. Because I want us to be fair, right? If we say people were participating, like the people who went to my town and killed my father, other people, they were merely Crown people.
Look, Dennis, that's a different situation. People fighting wars and civilians get killed. That's different from some people bending on killing completely annihilating a second.
But that's how it was in my home, right? When the people went there, they were bent on annihilating the.
Are you telling me that Crown people went in the Southeast specifically through LPC to kill all Gro people? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the same thing with
maybe I wasn't in Liberia. Let me do the next.
No, hold on. Let me because I want us to get this clear, right? Because the same thing happened with Mandingo people and Loma people, right? When the Mandingo people went to the Loma area, they did the same thing.
I know your point. I know where you're getting at, and you're gonna be on your own with that.
No, I'm saying
Mandingo people and Loma people, and I'm attached to the two tribes. So let's forget. Don't talk about something you heard.
No.
Let me tell you what I saw.
No, but how do you know I didn't see this too?
But then let me make my point.
Yeah, because but Aliyu, I don't want us to do this kind of thing, right? Because
you want me to go, or you want me to make my point? You're not gonna tell me what I want.
No, because I don't want you to spew tribal hate on the channel, right? If I don't correct that,
I don't know what you're talking about tribal hate. When someone who's a crime man apologizes for what happened in Nimba,
no, he did not apologize as a crime man.
Nimba country to apologize.
No, he did not apologize as crime. They apologized as government of Liberia. Because
it wasn't Doe who apologized. It was the government after the TRC.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things. Doe did not do any apology to anyone.
I'm not trying to satisfy you. What I'm saying
No, I'm trying to correct anything that would
make my point.
No. I'm trying to correct those kind of things because
this is what we call censorship. You want to demand me to say what you want me to say.
No. What I'm saying is what you are saying is inaccurate.
And what difference is
it's inaccurate, it's bigoted, and it's ignorant. And let me explain to you why your statement is ignorant. Let me correct you. The first thing is that Nimba is in Liberia. It's an administrative district of Liberia. And there was a war that was ethnically motivated, unfortunately. But to claim that everyone in Nimba was a perpetrator of war is
Right.
absurd. It's ridiculous. It's tribalistic. This is the kind of tribal bigotry we're talking about. When the president of the Republic of Liberia threatens an entire section of people based on their ethnicity, and he's sitting in the highest office of the land representing the entire country, behaving like a tribalist and a warlord when he's there to be president for an entire country, that is completely different from individual warlords from different ethnic groups doing bad things. You cannot blame Kron people or Grand Jita for Samuel Doe's behavior. You cannot blame all people of every ethnic group for everything that every bad person in their ethnic group does. That's not how the world works. That's how the mind of a tribalist works. You don't attribute bad behavior to someone's ethnicity. It's some of the simple thinking, the simple-mindedness that has perpetuated violence and war. If one Muslim person offends you, all Muslim people do not offend you. If one Christian person offends you, it is not the property of all Christian people. If we don't stop thinking this way, we'll never advance, we'll never be enlightened, we'll never have our renaissance as a country. So I'm really glad Dennis cut you off, because that is the kind of thinking that instead of passing ethics on to our children, instead of passing concepts of higher thinking onto our children, we're passing on bigotry and hatred and marginalization and dehumanization and tribalism to our children. This is unfortunate that an adult male in this day and age would speak in those terms. At no time did anyone blame any ethnic group on the show until you called. You should be ashamed. We're talking about facts of history. We're talking about individual actions here. The actions of individuals, and you come and attribute the actions of individuals to entire linguistic families. Is that normal? It is not.
No,
but again, this is what war and conflict has done to our people. We don't even attribute people's bad behaviors to themselves. It is now the property of everyone who speaks their language. It makes no sense. And this is why innocent people kept getting killed in retaliation for something an individual did. That is what perpetuated the violence of our war.
Definitely.
Is innocent people being punished for the acts of individuals who happen to speak their language.
It's sad. I was in the war. As a teenager, and all through, I was there in refugee camp. Individuals, what people did, and it was after the war, because when we were in the war, and I saw Burkinabes as a very young person in the war, I got up really hitting people from Burkina Faso, thinking that was the country, but these were individuals on the fringes of society.
Exactly.
Who were recruited in the war. How do you blame and Burkinabes are good and loving people.
Exactly.
I met some of them in the Assembly of God Church.
Exactly.
And I'm like, wow. As a child, I hated them because of their presence in the war. So for Aliyu to be talking like this, hey, let's Nimba County apologize because in Nimba County people were killed, and you are saying let them apologize because they are, as if an entire group of people will gather and say, today we as an ethnic group, we are going to go and commit atrocities. A lot of people die as a result of that, and we cannot tolerate that channel.
And the thing is, and I really appreciate the way that I was brought up. And I do realize everyone wasn't brought up the way that I was. But I appreciate my mother for bringing me up, because she's an educated woman. She's intelligent. And my father was killed. My father was innocent. He had nothing to do with anything that was going on, but they murdered my father simply basically my father was killed by the government of Liberia, because the violence that began in November 1985 was government sponsored against innocent people. And they were nitpicking and assassinating and murdering people simply because of where they were from. And at no time growing up did I hear from my family that, oh, Crown people kill your pa. It never was told to me as a child. I was told your father was murdered by government troops. And that is exactly what it was. And that was a fact. I didn't even in this pain of losing a loved one to violence that was based on tribe, it was not something that was reiterated and emphasized. I wasn't raised to think that some Zoles in Grand Jita or some headman in Grand Jita rose up and started a war in Liberia, because that is not a fact. The order to assassinate people and kill people, citizens of Liberia, came from the executive mansion. That is why the TRC had the government apologize, and not Grand Jita, and not Nimba, and not Lofa, and not Bong, because the government represents the people, and it was the government that was a primary actor in the initiation of the conflict. This is a fact.
That's
so that's what we're going to deal with. Individual actions.
Definitely. Let's get our last caller, and then we can wrap this up. Caller, your name and where you're calling from. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, caller, your name and where you're calling from.
Yes, my name is James from Muyankado, and I'm calling from Maryland, United States.
Go ahead, James.
So it's a very interesting show. The sister is very brilliant, and so is yourself. I want to thank you all. I think
but James,
tribalism.
James,
yeah.
What's about me? Am I not brilliant?
He said you as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't hear
that. Especially for compliments. You're brilliant, Dennis. Your shirt is very nice.
Go ahead, James.
Matter of fact, very, very brilliant. I thank you all for the show. It's very informative. This is what we need in our country to educate our people. I think tribalism and corruption are like 6 and 7. That's what's really plaguing our country. The thinking of the gentleman who spoke trying to blame the people of Nimba for what happened is ridiculous, and is I don't know what to say. It's insane. We should think of our tribes as the threads that make up the Liberian fabric. Okay. And it's an integral part of the Liberian fabric. It's a good thing to be proud of your tribe, but your tribe cannot cover you. If you go to another country, you're not going to say, "Oh, I'm a Geo man," or "I'm a Prime man," and ask you who you are. You are a Liberian first, before any of your tribes. Not to say that they're not important, but Liberia is that blanket that covers us all. So until we stop, tribalism and start looking at each other as brothers, we would not be able to compete with the rest of the world. We're just going to stay divided, and I think that's what's going on. So we should preach eradicating tribalism. Anybody that comes around tribalist, we should stay away from them because it's not going to take us anywhere.
And we should shame them. I said, and we should shame them. They should be shamed.
Shame them. We have to, because we're not going to be able to compete. You can't compete as a crime person or as a guild person or as a Loma person. You have to compete as a Liberian. And until we can look at ourselves as equals and understand that we all play a major role in fighting to push this country forward, we'll continue to be divided and playing games and with our future. We have to come together. Forget what happened. It's people that are close that fight. The Crown man and Guild man fought because they live in the same area.
Of course.
They're going to bump heads. Every country has something like that in their history. Just look, you'll find it. It's not hard to find. So we can't dwell on what we did, our contemporary history. We have to move forward, move past that. And I would encourage all my Crown brothers and all my Guild brothers and all my Loma brothers, all of us, let's look past tribalism. Let's look together as one and trying to push the agenda of our country. So I want to thank you. I'm not going to stay on too long, but you guys are brilliant. The history, it's so captivating. I always tune in and watch and learn and take notes. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Carl, my last question to you will be, what would be the litmus test? Because we're talking about unification and integration, which was started even before it was officially announced and codified. So how do we know that at this point that the goal of integration and unification has been accomplished? What would be the test? How can we tell?
We would tell based on the way Liberians express their desires through democracy, through the democratic process, through politics. When we get to elections and people start to talk about ideas and not ethnicity, when people start to talk about, when politicians start to push ideas and not ethnicity, not using ethnicity as a basis to mobilize people, at that point, we will know we've arrived somewhere. This does not mean that groups, minority groups, and when I say minority groups in Liberia, it's really about religion, right? Because there's diversity, but the majority of the country is Christian. So a minority group in Liberia would be a religious minority, for example. So there's nothing wrong with people who belong to a belief system that is practiced by a smaller number of people getting together and saying, hey, we're different. We don't have certain, we don't feel that we have the same rights and privileges as other citizens. So based on this, we're going to push to make Liberia better and more inclusive. This is not selfishness. This is about promoting the country's elevation, right? The country's collective upliftment. So that is a positive, a group political agenda. Just like when you see minority groups in the United States fight for, liberty, for equality, that equality uplifts everyone in the country, not just the group that's fighting. Mm. So when you see groups like Islamic groups saying, hey, we need more representation, this is something the entire country should get behind, because when people who have been traditionally, feel that they've been traditionally marginalized can be incorporated, it lifts all of us up, right? We're no greater than the least among us, in other words. We do, and the same thing with women. If women are traditionally being suppressed, degraded, disrespected, and if women galvanize and say, you know what, we're going to promote the inclusion of more women in the democratic process, that is healthy. That uplifts the entire country. The problem becomes when it is my tribe against the country. When you start hearing things like, oh, Southeasterners, we're alike, we got to unite ourselves against the rest of Liberia. This is a problem. Or you start hearing people say, oh, we are our Christian group, we're going to unite against anybody that doesn't believe in our faith. Or a Muslim group, we're marginalized, therefore we're going to go against Liberia. This is a different mentality. But whenever it is a healthy political discussion where we're talking about advancing the collective cause of the country, and this cannot be done without everyone feeling that they have equal access, that they are a part, that they are included, right? Inclusion. Without that, that would be the litmus test. And to see people supporting groups that they don't belong to who are traditionally marginalized. Seeing men supporting women's groups, seeing Christians supporting Muslim activists. This would be a litmus test, because these are your fellow citizens. And if they're aggrieved, you should be aggrieved.
So my people, thank you. This whole unification, getting together business, we're talking about men, whether you woman, we all equal. Whether you come from Bassa or you come from Nizo, we all equal. Whether you're Muslim or you're Christian, we're the same people. So let's put Liberia first. And then the small tribe business, the country you come from, or whether you get money more than the other people, that sad talk, Liberia first. So we want to thank you and appreciate you. Happy Independence or Unification Day. Kukatono, call your closing.
It's been fun. I love, as you all know, I love history. I love researching history. I think history explains the present. I mean, you cannot really understand the present without understanding the past. And you will not know what moves to make going into the future without having an understanding of the present. So it's all connected. On Saturday, we had last week, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch the King Peter's In Search of King Peter, which we did last Saturday. This Saturday, we're going to talk a little bit more about what was happening on the Grain Coast or the Windward Coast here, where we'll call Liberia, right before the repatriates arrived. So we're going to be talking about what Samuel Bacon saw when he explored the coast and who he talked to, what people were doing and who was who and all that kind of stuff. It'll be very interesting. These are stories that are written down, but we never talk about them. When we read them, we don't call and have an open discussion. And so please join us on Saturday, Dennis and I, at 7 p.m. for the Liberian History Channel.
Thank you so much, Carl. I want to thank our viewers for watching, those who are watching now and those who will watch later. Please don't forget to support us, follow us on all major social media platforms. We are trying very hard, looking for money so that we'll be on the radio in Liberia. So please connect with us. It requires money. The people are charging us arm and leg. We want all the good things that we are teaching on the internet be on the radio in Liberia as well. So thank you for supporting those who keep sending us small money, those who keep calling us and say, oh, the thing you're doing, we like it. Thank you. We appreciate all of you. Please continue to support us, and we will do our best to bring you the very best. Until then, we close with our song that says, we are all Liberians. Have a good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people, Liberia.